Hey, I'm glad to be with you on this call, although I'm doing it pre-recorded because I'm in Dubai, so it'd be midnight here. I'm in the middle of a meeting with people from all around North Africa, Middle East, and we've got our first meeting. We had people who were seeing four generation plus movements in the region, and about 12 or so of those. And then second meeting, people are seeing some second and third generation, got about 20 of those. 11 years ago, when we had our first meeting, those numbers are zero. And so, one of the things I want to encourage you about is keep doing what you're doing, keep working at it, keep praying, keep uh, learning, keep encouraging each other, keep asking God to give you the spiritual gift of stubbornness, not to give up. I would commend you. I think you guys doing great work. This recent report that came out, just over 1,000 churches, and most of those are among lost people that have come to faith and are starting other groups. And I think the way you encourage each other and work with each other and learn with each other, you're doing a great job. So I strongly encourage you to keep it up, and glad that I get to be with you guys sometimes online and in person. I wanted to talk to you today about the concept of movement servants. And so I'm going to share my screen with you and just talk about this, um, concept of movement servants and how that could apply to you guys. So a few years ago, we started asking this question of what, how are movements being started today? And we recognize that over 90% of the 2,000 plus movements around the world have been launched by existing movements, which means only 10% of movements have been launched by outsiders starting with a brand new effort, starting from scratch, starting from zero. So we still need people starting from scratch. There's still a lot of places where, there aren't any movements in the vicinity. So we've got to keep getting those started. But if 90% of movements are started by other movements, the best way to help start movements is to help existing movement leaders and disciples start other movements. And so these 2,000 or so movements are part of about 40 families of movements. These are a movement family is a movement of related movements that often in the same part of the world, but not necessarily only one part. Um, for instance, there's a movement in a large country in Southeast Asia that's actually started movement efforts in about 25 other countries. So they're bound together relationally. And as people move, as people visit other places and start new work, there's this familial responsibility to help these children and grandchildren learn and grow and be coached. So since that reality of 90% exists, we began talking about movement servant the last few years. And a movement servant comes alongside movement leaders to help expand the movement or movements, assisting with a wide range of activities depending on the needs and the instructions of the movement leaders. And so, Jesus talks a lot about he um, came not to be served, but to serve, and that whoever wants to be the greatest should be a servant of others. And he himself gave up his rights and took on the form of a human being, and gave up the divine rights to become a human being, become a servant, become obedient, even to the point of death. And so, as we're thinking about how can we follow in those footsteps, um, I've actually had people say, why don't you come up with a better term, movement servant, and that's it's harder to promote, and let's get a better phrase. And I'm like, oh, Jesus used it. It's a pretty good phrase. Um, so yeah, I think this is a great calling. In fact, often in the Bible, or in Christian circles, we talk about servant leadership. Jesus didn't really talk about that. He talked about being a servant. He talked a whole lot more about serving others, and not this idea that my main goal is to be a leader, and so I'll do it by serving. But Jesus said our main goal is to serve, and because we do that, we can lead others to Jesus. So as we talk about these movement servants, I wanted to just cover a few principles, and some of these in a couple articles that Dave Coles and I wrote in Mission Frontiers. I think Chris has shared those out with you. The first thing is that prayer is first. A lot of people are saying, well, you have to say that. No, we don't have to say that. We know that's the truth. We know prayer is the number one thing that we need. And interestingly enough, some of you might know the story of J.O. Fraser, missionary to the Lisu people in China in late 1800s, early 1900s. And he could live among the southern Lisu, but he could not get up into the northern Lisu area. So he spent half his workday praying for the northern Lisu and half his workday going out and sharing the gospel among the southern Lisu. At the end of his career, there were hundreds in the southern Lisu where he lived and witnessed, but there were thousands in the northern Lisu where he, quote, could only pray. And I had a very interesting story recently. A friend of mine here in Dubai met the great grandson of one of these northern Lisu believers. And he tells the story. He knows it, even 4 generations later. He says that his grandfather actually met J.O. Fraser and had come down into the South, and J.O. Fraser was surprised to hear that there were believers in the North. And he said, how many believers are there? And this man's great grandfather turned and pointed to a mountainside covered with trees and said, there are more believers than there are trees on that mountainside. Well, you can imagine Fraser's just how much that moved him, and just the joy that he received from that. And so it's a great example of prayer is the work. It's not something we do and then we work, but prayer is the first and foundational part of the work. So one of the questions is, how can we help mobilize prayer? How can we pray ourselves? How can we come alongside these movements in prayer? The second principle is the entire body of Christ is needed. We don't just need evangelists. We don't just need apostles. We need apostles and prophets and evangelists and shepherds and teachers. But there are many other gifts that are described in the New Testament, and we need all those gifts as well. And so whatever you do, whatever your gifting is, however you serve, you're needed in seeing these movements among those who are cut off from the gospel. We're aiming for these holistic church planting movements, disciple making movements, kingdom movements, Book of Acts movements. That's the goal. The goal of missions is to plant the gospel where people have not heard, where tell the good news, where it is news. The goal of church planting is to plant new churches in places where there are communities that are unserved or underserved by the church. And so whether it's media or community development or health ministries, all of these should serve for the main point, which is the expansion of new disciples and new churches. And so anything we do, we've got to ask the question, how does this fit into the end strategy, which is seeing these multiplying disciples and churches form. I was at a meeting where I, just kind of observing and listening, and was kind of doing a week of coaching with an organization. And at the last day, I had 5 people who were local people, indigenous to different countries that these foreigners were working alongside. I had them come up and I said, so I've kind of observed when people talk about finding their quote national partner, end quote, how does that make you feel? And all of them in different words said, really it hurts our feelings. They said, we thought we were brothers and sisters, and yet we keep getting referred to as partners. And they said, it feels like a business project. It doesn't feel like a love family relationship, brothers and sisters. So they're not looking for partnership. They're looking for brothers and sisters who love each other and serve each other. Now, in that, you will partner to do things, but their goal is first and foremost the relationship, not the task-oriented partnership. So as we talk about, hey, I'd like to be a movement servant. What can I do? What does that look like? There's some realities to that. So one of the realities is movements are not sitting around waiting for you to volunteer, right? They're getting after it. They're going in many directions, doing many things. The average movement grows over the last 40 years. All movements put together on average grow at about 23% a year, which means they're doubling every 3 or 4 years. But you can imagine just trying to keep up with that rate of growth. And some are growing faster than that. So they're super busy. They're definitely overloaded. They're constantly multiplying leaders, but there's still always, just this tremendous drain trying to keep up with everything. So if you say, hey, I want to volunteer, you're going to need to be patient. You need to offer your help and not say, hey, I've offered my help. Why aren't you using it? I just say, hey, I'm here to help. I'm glad to help. Let me know any way I can help. Begin to, figure out ways you can fit in. Join a prayer call if they've got one. Find out any volunteer needs they have and try to help them fill them. See if there's something happening you could help raise some money for. But don't do it in, okay, I'm going to do these things and then they'll be obligated. Just say, I'm trying to help. I'd love to help more. I don't know what that looks like, but let's explore that. Let's see what that looks like. So you may not be able to connect directly to the top movement leaders, sometimes due to security, sometimes just due to their lack of time. But there are other ways to serve. And so, just have the attitude, I'm ready to help. I'm ready to do anything. I'm here. Let me know. I'm willing to explore. I'm willing to wait 2 or 3 years until something emerges that I can help with. First and foremost, they are looking for these brothers and sisters. They're looking for people they can trust. They don't want people to come in and next thing you know, you're telling their stories and you're using it to build your credibility, your name, or even sometimes raise money based on that. But just show up and say, hey, I want to help. What can I do to help? And be the kind of person that they can trust. So you do need to learn everything you can about movements and be a movement practitioner right where you are. So you're far more likely to be helpful if you're actually a part of doing DMM yourself. If you're a practitioner, if you're learning what it looks like to start groups that become churches and help them start groups. So don't think, oh, I'll just go help them, but learn how to do it yourself. They'll be definitely more interested in partnering with you, and opening the door for you if they know you're actually doing it where you are. So some of what we do is we're going to try to match make. So if you say, hey, I'd like to help, but I don't know what I can do. Okay, tell us who you are, tell us your background, tell us your skills, tell us your interest. Um, God kind of steering you toward a certain population group or certain part of the world, or are there people from an unreached area that live in your city that make a natural connection to a movement? Let's say there are a bunch of Somalis in your city. Well, then maybe we could try to connect you to some a movement family working among Somali people. So it is definitely an exploration. It's a matchmaking. It's looking for opportunities. Um, it's offering, hey, these are the things I can do, and I'll do anything you ask me to, and just trying to figure that out as we move along. So requirements, obviously you need to be a disciple of Jesus. You're working as a disciple maker. They definitely want to see people doing that. You're making your best effort. You're an advocate of these movement principles. You're willing to submit to local leaders. I had one movement leader say to me, he said, "Are you telling me that some Westerners are going to come in here and they're going to listen and they're going to do what we ask them to do, and they're not going to think they know better than we do? And after a couple of years, they're not going to offer a salary to some of my key guys and key leaders and take them out and get them to start working for them?" And I said, "Yes, I'm telling you, there are people like that." He said, "That has not been my experience with most." He said, "Obviously there are exceptions." So he's willing, he said, "I'd love to work with those who are the exception." Willing to learn and be sensitive to uh, other cultures and how to work with people from other cultures, and just you know take your time and learn, and be willing to admit mistakes and be willing to apologize and be willing to ask questions, and just being someone who can learn and adapt. They need you. They don't want to work with you unless you're going to keep your commitments, unless you've got integrity. Um, and then willing to do whatever you can to serve. If someone says, "Well, I'm, for instance, I'm a doctor, and if you have medical stuff, I'll do it, but I can't do anything else." They're probably not going to be able to use that much. Now, they might be able to use it for a medical trip or something like that, but they're looking for people who are willing to do whatever is needed. Now, if you're a medical person, they're going to probably make use of your medical skills, but that may not be all they need help with, and that may not be, um, might not even be the first thing you do. It might be something that emerges down the road. So possibilities. Here are just a few examples of things. Most of these are things people are already doing in some form or fashion with an existing movement. So prayer and mobilizing prayer from outside the movement, international networking. Next week you're going to, I think, hear from Ken Morris, who works with the Movement Family in Africa, and he's their U.S. representative, helps them make connections, in the U.S. and in other places. Communication efforts, helping with newsletters, helping with video, or training people how to do video, or helping get things translated. All kinds of possibilities. Job and business startup training, if you've got a background in that. But again, it definitely need to be adjusted to their realities. There are some models out there you can learn from and then help introduce it, or coach it in their area, or help raise some of the startup money to do this. Computer technical support, video recording and or editing, audio recording and or editing. Again, there are people helping do this, especially training people to do these things where they can train other people to do them. So you're not doing all the audio recording, you're helping equip people to do that and train others to do that as well. Fundraising, but in ways that don't create dependency. Again, they work with you on that. Social media, help with creation, distribution. Again, in ways that they want you to, not in ways that make sense to you. Hosting vision trips, where you're helping bring people in to see the work if possible. A lot of times it's not, and sometimes it is. And hey, this is what's happening. This is how you could be a part of what's going on here. So you can host that and be a bit of a bridge between outsiders and those in the movement. Administrative help. There are, again, quite a few things you could do to help in different contexts with administration. Some of them are willing to take outside interns, but they really don't want to do it unless someone else kind of manages them. And then these outside interns can come alongside and serve in the movement and learn what it's like to, be a part of the movement, and then potentially go work in a new place and help start some new work. The disaster response service, so going and helping after a disaster, or training or connections. Again, fitting it to their context. Movements are already and always responding to crises, but what can we do to help them be more effective? What can we do to come alongside them? Not tell them how to do it, but say, okay, tell me how you're doing it, and then see what you could possibly do to assist them. Medical service, equipping medical response within the movement. There are all kinds of opportunities as long as it fits into the long-term strategy. Assisting with support, networking, whatever else might be needed. Our goal is to help bring the gospel where it's never been. So these movements, sometimes you're helping them expand to new places. Sometimes you're helping them grow deeper and stronger in their own context, which will in turn help them expand into new places. So as you look at that, there's just a variety of these possibilities. And finally, just anything and everything that's needed. They really could use servants as long as we are servants, and as long as we see what they need and then try to help them figure out how to get the kind of help. So I thought I'd give you a few examples of these movement servants and some of the things that they're doing. So there's a guy that volunteered to serve a movement several years ago. He lived in the country, learned the language, and they're like, well, we don't know what you can do. And then next thing you know, COVID hits, and he was a big help to them, training people how to use Zoom. And then he would be a part of the leadership calls where they had leaders from around the movement, and he'd take those calls that were recorded and he'd chop them into small bite-sized pieces with the key points, and then he'd share that back out to a lot of people in the movement, where they could actually use WhatsApp to share it because the file size was smaller. And then they get them translated in English because they were coaching people in other countries that needed to learn from what they're doing. And so he went from, well, we don't know how you can help, to doing a lot of things that can help. And now he's doing quite a few other things, but that's an example of how someone got started and then it expanded into many other opportunities. There's a team being formed that's actually going to be based here that is saying, hey, we'll be ready to do rapid response for crises, but we're going to do it in a way that serves the movements. So if a movement is a crisis happens, we'll contact them, see if they want our help. If they do want our help, how they want our help. We'll have people lined up from around the world that could come in and help out with different skill sets. And the overall goal will always be to help the long term, the extended efforts of the movement, over years, not just in that immediate crisis. Prayer, 110cities.com, you can take a look at that. Each one of these needs a prayer champion team. And in fact, John Bradshaw is going to help be part of the prayer champion team, or lead it and recruit others to be part of the prayer champion team for Bangkok. And so people saying, hey, I'll be a champion for that. I'll help make that happen. Medical teams. There are people arranging for medical teams to come in and usually do a one-time clinic or one-time eyeglass clinic or health clinic or something like that, just to create goodwill in the community. And then they don't expect those people to keep coming in time after time. That just shows some goodwill and creates some access, and then they can continue on with more reproducible patterns of health and serving health needs that local people can do. But as outsiders, kind of open the door that the long-term movement people can continue walking through. I know some folks that have trained in cross-cultural counseling, and they're working alongside some of these movements to help do this. Um, a related example would be some of you guys know Dave Coles. His wife Jean Coles has been part of wholeness prayer using scripture and patterns to help people work through different forms of trauma, different forms of sin. And this approach has been translated into a lot of other languages, and since a lot of it is discovery Bible based, it's applicable across the board. Another context, a place that's, almost 100% Muslim, wanted a computer teacher. And so someone going in there, with some credentials from the outside, and they're a computer teacher, and they're kind of an attraction because, hey, here's this Westerner helping us out. Or another instance, here's this guy from a developed Asian country coming to our poorer country helping us out. And it just kind of creates this interest and attraction that they then can use to kind of hand off to the broader church planting team that's partnered there in that vicinity. Same thing with English teacher. I know quite a few instances where someone teaches English, and that opens the door for others who live in the area, who are from that movement, to follow up those who express some interest. There's groups help with Bible translation, and while that's a more technical thing, there are different ways that people can use their technical skills or expertise. And one guy that went in, he was a professor in business, and they brought him in to teach in a local university. I know another guy who was an expert in international law. They brought him in to teach, for like a year at a local university. And then connections that these professors made, they were equipped to, what to say, what not to say, and then how to hand these interested people off to people who are from that country. There's a guy who's a sound engineer. He goes in and helps people set up simple recording studios in closets or in rooms, in a facility they might have, and do it in a way that's not expensive. It's based on what they can buy and source locally. The guy's a filmmaker, helping people learn how to do film themselves. Some have shot documentaries and help produce it. The movement can then use it to tell people what they're doing. Others have a couple of other instances where they're training people how to do their own videos in much more reproducible manners. Church mobilizers say, hey, I'll be your representative. I'll go talk to churches in my sphere of influence and tell them what you're doing, and mobilize people to pray, mobilize people to give, mobilize people to come along with some of these skills like medical teams or some of these other things mentioned above. Fundraising. What do you need? I'll pray and work and network and help people and help you find the funds that you need. And these movement leaders don't want dependency, so they're always looking to do it in ways that are not creating dependency. An example of that would be some of these funds to start up a business. It's a one-time gift. It helps the business get started. I know one network that's started almost 300 businesses, And then in turn, those businesses with, even that, 60% of funds come from inside, 40% from outside, so they can do more. And then those businesses have started up another over 1,000 businesses from the profits of their own business, and the businesses have been effective at planting churches in those areas. So those initial funds and prayer for those efforts can be very strategic. Literacy chain. I know someone right now who's helping train people in literacy so they can then go into new communities. And I just heard an instance today, go back to the community that they got expelled from because of their faith, but now they can go back and actually got accepted. The woman's father who had kicked her out stood up in front of the village and said, "Hey, I was wrong. She's come back to help us. You know, I'm proud of her and I bless her, and we want to open the door to her to help us in any way she can." Helping people do audio Bibles. There's a guy who's shifted over where he's helping these movements record audio scripture in a multitude. They're up to like 20 different languages, but he's just helping them do the recording and teach people how to do the recording and do the editing. And he's helping them increase their impact. So those are just some examples that we see. And if you want to be a movement servant, start praying about it. Let's start talking about it. Let's see what your background, your skills, your abilities are. And again, most importantly is your attitude. And if you've got a servant attitude, I'm confident it might take a while, but we'd love to figure out ways that you could be a part of serving the movement, help the movement both strengthen and deepen, as well as expand into new unreached peoples and places. So great to be with you virtually, and look forward to talking to you more about these needs and these opportunities.